Rich businessman forces his secretary to work late. What she does next stuns him. Ethan Wallace leaned back in his plush leather chair, the skyline of the city sprawling behind him like a painting. His office, a masterpiece of modern design, was filled with trophies, framed magazine covers with his face on them, and awards for his unparalleled contributions to business. It was the throne room of a man who ruled his world with an iron fist and a sharp tongue. "Miss Bennet." His voice sliced through the office, sharp and commanding. Ethan didn't even look up from the papers on his desk as he called for his secretary. He didn't need to, people always came running when he summoned them. Sophia Bennet hurried in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She carried a stack of files so high that it obscured her view, her glasses slipping down her nose as she juggled a notebook and a pen. "Yes, Mr. Wallace?" she asked, her tone calm despite the chaos she carried. She placed the files on his desk and stood at attention, her professional demeanor masking the weariness she felt after a long day. Ethan barely glanced at her before flipping open one of the folders. "I need you to stay late tonight," he said bluntly. "There's a client presentation tomorrow morning, and these figures need to be recalculated. They're a mess." Sophia blinked, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was already 6:30 p.m. She'd been working since 8 o'clock that morning without a break, and she had plans tonight, a meeting for her side project that she'd been nurturing in secret for months. "I understand, Mr. Wallace," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision. "But I have an important appointment tonight. Perhaps I can finish this first thing in the morning?" Ethan's eyes snapped up, narrowing at her. "Excuse me," he said, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Did I just hear you say no?" Sophia shifted uncomfortably. She could feel her heartbeat quicken, but she held her ground. "It's not that I'm refusing, sir. I just—" "Enough," Ethan interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "If I could do it myself, I wouldn't need you here. But I can't, so you will. Cancel whatever plans you have. This is more important." Sophia opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself. She knew arguing would be pointless. Ethan Wallace wasn't the kind of man who entertained objections, especially from people he considered beneath him. Instead, she nodded curtly. "Of course, sir. I'll get started right away." "Good," Ethan said, already turning his attention back to the documents in front of him. "I expect those numbers on my desk by 7 a.m. tomorrow." Sophia walked out of his office, her face carefully composed, but inside, frustration and resentment boiled. This wasn't the first time Ethan had dismissed her needs, and she doubted it would be the last. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't just disrupting her plans, he was jeopardizing something she had worked tirelessly to build. Hours later, the office was silent except for the soft tapping of Sophia's keyboard. She sat at her desk, the glow of her computer screen highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she glanced at the notification. A message from her friend and collaborator, Maya. "Maya, are you still coming tonight? Everyone's waiting." Sophia's chest tightened. She had promised to present their proposal for a women's entrepreneurship initiative, a project she had poured her heart and soul into. It was her chance to finally break free from the confines of Ethan's shadow and do something meaningful. But now she was trapped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed out a response. "Sophia, I'm stuck at work. I'll send you the notes. Good luck." She hit send, a pang of guilt twisting in her stomach. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had envisioned standing in front of the room with Maya, sharing their vision and seeing the spark of excitement in people's eyes. Instead, she was here, crunching numbers for a man who didn't even know her first name. Ethan, meanwhile, sat in his office, reviewing the numbers Sophia had already sent. He sipped his scotch, oblivious to the toll his demands took on the people around him. In his mind, the world revolved around results, and emotions were irrelevant. He didn't concern himself with what his employees did outside of work. As far as he was concerned, their lives began and ended at his office door. "Miss Bennet," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "These people don't understand what it takes to succeed." As the night dragged on, Sophia's exhaustion turned to determination. Her hands moved faster over the keyboard, not because she wanted to please Ethan but because she wanted to finish and leave. The thought of her project, Her dream kept her going. If she could just hold on a little longer, she could find a way to escape this cycle. By the time she finally sent the finished report to Ethan's inbox, it was nearly 1 a.m. She shut down her computer, gathered her things, and left the office, the cool night air hitting her like a slap. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed again. "Maya, we did it. They loved it. Everyone wants to know when we can start." Sophia stopped in her tracks, staring at the screen. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and regret. She should have been there. She should have stood beside Maya as they took the first step toward making their vision a reality. But she wasn't. And as she climbed into her car, she made a silent promise to herself. This would be the last time she let Ethan Wallace control her life. The drive home was quiet, but Sophia's thoughts were anything but. The glow of Maya's message lingered on her phone screen, a constant reminder of the night's missed opportunity. As she pulled into her driveway, she sat in her car for a moment, staring at the dashboard. The events of the day churned in her mind: Ethan's dismissiveness, the project she'd sacrificed to appease him, and the promise she'd made to herself. Inside her small apartment, she dropped her bag on the couch and sank into a chair at the dining table. The materials for her project were scattered across it: blueprints for workshops, plans for mentorship programs, and contact lists of women eager to join the initiative. Sophia ran her fingers over the papers, her resolve hardening. "Never again," she murmured to herself. Sophia knew she couldn't leave her job overnight. She had bills to pay, and her project wasn't fully funded yet. But she also knew she couldn't keep living like this. Ethan Wallace might control her working hours, but he didn't control her dreams. She just had to play her cards right. The next morning, Ethan walked into the office with his usual swagger, coffee in hand. He greeted no one, his eyes fixed on his phone as he scrolled through emails. When he reached his desk, he found the report Sophia had sent sitting neatly in his inbox. He scanned the numbers, nodding to himself. Efficient as always, he muttered, not realizing, or caring, how much effort it had taken. Sophia arrived shortly after, her face composed despite the fatigue etched beneath her eyes. She placed a fresh stack of documents on Ethan's desk, then returned to her own. It was a routine they had repeated countless times, but today, something was different. Sophia wasn't just working for Ethan anymore, she was working for herself. Over the next few weeks, Sophia dedicated every spare moment to her initiative. She coordinated with Maya during lunch breaks, wrote grant proposals late into the night, and attended networking events on weekends. Slowly but surely, their project began to gain traction. Ethan, oblivious to her extracurricular activities, continued to pile work onto her plate. He called her into his office one afternoon, tossing a folder onto his desk. "These figures need to be reworked," he said without looking up. "I need them by the end of the day." Sophia clenched her jaw but kept her voice steady. "I'll get it done, Mr. Wallace." As she left his office, she glanced at the clock. She had a meeting with a potential investor in 3 hours, one she couldn't afford to miss. Sophia hurried back to her desk, calculating how much time she could spare before leaving. The meeting was held at a trendy cafe downtown. Sophia arrived with her laptop and presentation materials in tow, her heart racing. The investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Grace, greeted her warmly and motioned for her to sit. "I've heard great things about your initiative," Grace said as Sophia set up her laptop. "It's refreshing to see someone tackling such an important issue." "Thank you," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "This project means everything to me. We want to create a space where women can not only learn and grow but also feel empowered to take control of their futures." Grace nodded as Sophia launched into her presentation. For the next half hour, Sophia outlined their plans, backed by data and testimonials from women eager to join. Grace listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When Sophia finished, Grace leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You've put together something remarkable," she said. "I'm impressed. I'd like to invest in your project." Sophia's heart soared. She shook Grace's hand, barely able to contain her excitement. As she packed up her materials, Grace added, "I'll have my assistant send over the paperwork tomorrow. Let's get this started." Back at the office, Ethan was waiting for Sophia when she returned. He glanced at his watch as she entered, his expression one of mild irritation. "Where have you been?" he asked. "I needed those reports an hour ago." Sophia placed the documents on his desk without flinching. "They're finished, Mr. Wallace." Ethan raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. Everything was in order, as usual. "Good," he said curtly. "Next time, don't disappear without letting me know." Sophia didn't respond. She simply returned to her desk, a small smile playing at her lips. Ethan might think he had the upper hand, but Sophia knew the truth. Her world was changing, and soon so would his. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Sophia and Maya finalized their plans, secured more funding, and began hiring staff for their initiative. Word of their work spread quickly, attracting attention from local media and influential figures. By the time their first workshop launched, it was already at capacity. Meanwhile, Ethan remained blissfully unaware of Sophia's success. His focus was on an upcoming merger that promised to solidify his position as one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. He spent long hours strategizing, confident that everything was under control. But cracks were beginning to form in his empire. The merger was proving more complicated than anticipated, and his board of directors was growing restless. Ethan, accustomed to being in control, found himself grappling with a situation he couldn't entirely manage. One afternoon, as Ethan scrolled through his news feed, a headline caught his eye. "Empowering Women, the Initiative Transforming Local Communities." Curious, he clicked on the article. His brow furrowed as he read the opening lines. "Sophia Bennett and Maya Patel are revolutionizing the landscape for women entrepreneurs with their groundbreaking initiative." Ethan froze. Sophia? His secretary? He reread the article, disbelief giving way to anger. How had she managed to do all this under his nose? And more importantly, why hadn't she told him? As the realization sank in, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Fear. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one holding the cards. Ethan sat back in his chair, the article still glowing on his screen. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, a growing unease settling over him. This wasn't just some side project Sophia had been dabbling in. This was a full-blown initiative gaining significant traction, the kind of thing that could make waves in the industry. Waves he hadn't created. He clicked through the article again, scanning for details. Names of prominent investors popped out, people he had tried to partner with but who had turned him down. He scrolled further and found glowing quotes from women who had attended Sophia's workshops, praising the impact the initiative had already made on their lives. Ethan leaned forward, his jaw tightening. How could someone like Sophia, quiet, diligent, unassuming, pull this off? And how had she managed to keep it from him? "Miss Bennett," he muttered under his breath, his voice laced with both irritation and grudging admiration. Sophia, meanwhile, was blissfully unaware of Ethan's discovery. She was busy overseeing the next steps for her initiative. The first workshop had been a success beyond her expectations, and the second was already filling up. Maya had been ecstatic, texting her late into the night with updates and ideas for future events. Sophia sat in her apartment, surrounded by notebooks and spreadsheets. She was exhausted but energized, the kind of tired that comes from doing something you truly care about. As she finalized the agenda for the next workshop, her phone buzzed. It was Maya. "We've been invited to speak at the Women in Business Summit next month." Huge opportunity. Sophia stared at the message, a grin spreading across her face. The summit was one of the most prestigious events in the city, attended by industry leaders, investors, and media. This wasn't just a chance to showcase their work, it was a chance to redefine their trajectory entirely. "Let's do it," Sophia replied. The next morning, Ethan called Sophia into his office. She entered with her usual composure, though there was a newfound confidence in her step. Ethan noticed it immediately, and it only fueled his frustration. "Sophia," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit." She complied, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "What can I do for you, Mr. Wallace?" Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. "I read something interesting last night," he began, his tone carefully controlled. An article about an initiative that's apparently making quite the impact in the community. Your initiative? Sophia's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, that's correct. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. Care to explain how you managed to build this venture while working here full-time? Sophia took a deep breath. I worked on it during my own time, outside of office hours. It didn't interfere with my responsibilities here. Didn't interfere? Ethan repeated, his voice rising slightly. You've been running a business under my nose, using resources I provided, and now you're making headlines. How do you think that reflects on me? Sophia held her ground. With all due respect, Mr. Wallace, this initiative has nothing to do with you. I've built it on my own, with my own time and resources. If anything, it reflects the skills I've honed while working here. Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by her calm defiance. He had expected excuses or apologies, not this quiet confidence. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he leaned back, his expression hardening. Just be careful, Miss Bennett. Balancing two worlds like this, it's a dangerous game. Sophia nodded politely and stood. Noted, Mr. Wallace. Is there anything else? When he shook his head, she left the office, her heart pounding. She knew she had just stepped onto thin ice, but she also knew she wasn't turning back. Ethan couldn't shake the conversation. As much as he wanted to dismiss Sophia's initiative as a distraction, he couldn't ignore the impact it was having or the growing buzz around it. For the first time, he found himself questioning his own approach. He had always believed success was about dominance, about outworking and outmaneuvering everyone else. But Sophia's success was built on something entirely different: empowerment, collaboration, and purpose. The thought unsettled him. The tension between Ethan and Sophia grew over the following weeks. Ethan's business began to hit roadblocks, delayed deals, missteps in strategy, and a board of directors increasingly concerned about the company's direction. Meanwhile, Sophia's initiative continued to thrive. Each new workshop brought more participants, more media attention, and more validation of her vision. The breaking point came at the Women in Business Summit. Sophia and Maya arrived at the event to a warm reception, greeted by a sea of influential faces. They were scheduled to speak on a panel about innovation in business, alongside some of the most respected names in the industry. As Sophia took the stage, she spotted Ethan in the audience. He was sitting near the back, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. She hadn't expected him to be there, and for a moment, it threw her off. But then she took a deep breath and began to speak. She shared the story of her journey, how she had started with nothing but an idea, how she had balanced a demanding job while building her dream, and how she had faced countless obstacles along the way. She spoke with passion and authenticity, her words resonating deeply with the audience. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Sophia's heart swelled as she looked out at the crowd, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never experienced before. As the panel ended and the attendees began to mingle, Ethan approached her. His expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of something else: respect. "You've done well," he said simply. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" Ethan smirked faintly. "Don't let it go to your head." She smiled, her confidence unwavering. "I won't. But thank you, Mr. Wallace. It means something coming from you." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm impressed. You built something incredible." Sophia didn't miss the hint of sincerity in his voice. "I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I hope you find something worth building too." With that, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the crowd. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one in control, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching as Sophia blended into the crowd, surrounded by people eager to speak with her. The applause from her panel still echoed faintly in the hall, a reminder of how much she had accomplished. For years, Ethan had believed that power meant having people answer to him. Now, watching Sophia's genuine connection with others, he realized he might have misunderstood what real influence looked like. As the crowd thinned, Ethan left the summit, his thoughts a chaotic mix of admiration, frustration, and self-reflection. He wasn't used to feeling outmaneuvered, especially not by someone he had underestimated. For the first time, he wondered if his approach to success had been fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, Sophia was riding the high of the summit's success. She and Maya had secured multiple new partnerships that would allow their initiative to expand nationally. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, and yet, it felt entirely deserved. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment she had doubted herself, it had all led to this. As she sat in her apartment that night, reviewing the offers they had received, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her eyebrows lifting in surprise. It was an email from Ethan. Subject: Congratulations. Body: Sophia, I wanted to congratulate you on your success. It's well earned, and I'm sure this is only the beginning for you. I'd like to meet to discuss how I might support your initiative, if you're interested. Ethan. Sophia stared at the email, her emotions mixed. She had spent so much time under Ethan's thumb, working tirelessly while he took her for granted. And now, he was offering to help? Part of her wanted to delete the message and move on. But another part, the part that believed in second chances, paused. The next day, Sophia replied, agreeing to meet. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. Ethan arrived first, uncharacteristically early, and waited with his usual coffee in hand. When Sophia walked in, she carried the same composed confidence that had stunned him at the summit. "Thank you for meeting me," Ethan said as she sat across from him. "I'm curious," Sophia replied, her tone polite but firm. "What exactly do you want to discuss?" Ethan took a deep breath. This wasn't easy for him. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "For years, I saw you as just my secretary. I didn't realize how capable you were, or how much potential you had. That was a mistake." Sophia arched an eyebrow. Ethan offered a faint smile, appreciating her honesty. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the summit, about building something that empowers others. It made me realize I've spent so much of my career focused on myself, on what I can gain, that I've missed the bigger picture." Sophia leaned back, folding her arms. "And now you want to be part of my bigger picture?" Ethan hesitated. "I want to help. Not because I think I can take credit or benefit from it, but because I believe in what you're doing. I'd like the chance to learn from you." Sophia was silent for a moment, studying him. She could see that this wasn't easy for him. Ethan Wallace, the man who never admitted he was wrong, was sitting across from her, asking for a second chance. It was an unexpected twist, and yet, it felt right. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But if I agree, there will be conditions. This isn't about you, Ethan. It's about the women we're helping and the vision we're building." "I wouldn't expect anything less," he replied. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan began working with Sophia and Maya's initiative in a supporting role. He used his connections to open doors they hadn't been able to access before, and to Sophia's surprise, he never tried to dominate the process. He showed up to workshops, offered mentorship to participants, and even helped secure funding for a new program. For Ethan, it was a humbling experience. He had always been the one in charge, but now he was learning to listen, to support, and to collaborate. The experience challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but it also gave him a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. The initiative continued to grow, its impact spreading far beyond what Sophia had imagined when she first started. At the next Women in Business Summit, she was the keynote speaker, addressing a packed auditorium. As she spoke about the power of resilience and the importance of creating opportunities for others, she caught Ethan's eye in the crowd. He nodded, a small but genuine gesture of respect. When the event ended, Ethan approached her. "You've built something extraordinary," he said. "I'm proud to have been a part of it." Sophia smiled, her confidence unshaken. "Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate that." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their shared journey hanging between them. For Sophia, it was a reminder of how far she had come. For Ethan, it was a lesson in humility and the value of seeing potential in others. As they parted ways, Sophia felt a deep sense of closure. She had taken control of her story, proving that no one, not even someone as powerful as Ethan Wallace, could define her worth. And in the process, She had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. For Ethan, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where success wasn't about power, but about purpose. And for Sophia, it was only the beginning of everything she was destined to achieve. As Sophia and Ethan parted ways after the summit, the impact of their journey lingered in both their lives. Sophia returned to her bustling initiative, now a beacon of hope for women across the city and beyond. The influx of interest following her keynote speech was overwhelming, but she handled it with the same poise and determination that had brought her this far. Ethan, however, found himself reflecting deeply on his career. He began to reevaluate not just his approach to business but also the legacy he wanted to leave behind. For years, his name had been synonymous with power and success, but now he realized those things felt hollow without purpose. A few weeks later, Sophia received a package at her office. Inside was a beautifully handwritten letter and a small box. She opened the letter first. "Dear Sophia, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you've achieved and the lessons you've taught me, lessons I didn't realize I needed. Watching you turn your vision into a reality has been both humbling and inspiring. I've decided to make some changes in my own life, starting with a focus on creating opportunities for others, much like you have. Enclosed is a token of my appreciation, a gesture to show my support for everything you've built. It's small compared to what you've accomplished on your own, but I hope it helps further your incredible work. With respect, Ethan Wallace." Sophia set the letter down and opened the box. Inside was a check, a substantial donation to her initiative, enough to fund several new programs and hire additional staff. For a moment, she was speechless. While she no longer needed validation from Ethan or anyone else, the gesture felt genuine, a sign that he had truly changed. She smiled to herself, thinking of how far they had both come. Ethan's transformation didn't stop there. He stepped down from his role as CEO, surprising everyone in his company. In his resignation speech, he spoke candidly about the need to prioritize people over profits and announced plans to dedicate his resources to philanthropic ventures. Some were skeptical of his motives, but those who had worked closely with him saw a man who was finally learning to balance ambition with empathy. He founded a mentorship program, targeting young professionals who needed guidance to navigate the business world without losing sight of their values. He even partnered with Sophia's initiative on a joint project, bringing together resources to launch an accelerator for women-led startups. The collaboration was a resounding success, earning praise from the media and the business community alike. One day, years later, Sophia and Ethan found themselves at another event, this time as co-panelists discussing the evolution of leadership. The room was packed with aspiring entrepreneurs, each eager to hear their stories. Sophia spoke first, sharing her journey with the same authenticity that had defined her from the beginning. She talked about the challenges she had faced, the people who had believed in her, and the power of staying true to her vision. When it was Ethan's turn, he began with a self-deprecating smile. "I used to think success was about being the smartest, the fastest, and the most ruthless person in the room. Then I met someone who showed me that true success is about lifting others up, not stepping over them." He glanced at Sophia, and the audience followed his gaze. The room erupted into applause, a testament to the impact both of them had made, not just as individuals but as unlikely allies who had learned from each other. After the panel, as they mingled with the attendees, a young woman approached them. She introduced herself as a participant in one of Sophia's early workshops and shared how it had given her the confidence to start her own business. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," she said, her voice brimming with gratitude. Sophia smiled warmly, glancing at Ethan. "You see? This is what it's all about." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a reminder that we're just getting started." As the evening drew to a close, Sophia and Ethan stood by the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. For Sophia, they represented endless possibilities, the dreams she had yet to chase and the lives she had yet to impact. For Ethan, they were a symbol of redemption and the clarity he had found in reshaping his path. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. "For everything." Sophia turned to him, her eyes kind but resolute. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing the work." Ethan chuckled, nodding. I will. And with that, they parted ways once again, not as adversaries, not even as friends, but as two people who had crossed paths at just the right time, leaving each other forever changed. In the years that followed, Sophia's initiative grew into a nationwide movement, a catalyst for change that inspired countless women to break through barriers and chase their dreams. The workshops turned into conferences, the mentorship programs expanded into incubators, and the ripple effect of her vision was felt in communities far beyond her own. Media outlets hailed her as a trailblazer, and she became a sought-after speaker at global events. Ethan, now a respected philanthropist, watched Sophia's rise with quiet pride. While his role in her journey had been small compared to her own efforts, he cherished the opportunity to have played even a minor part in her story. His own life had taken a vastly different turn, yet he found fulfillment in ways he had never imagined. His mentorship program thrived, helping young entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of the business world with integrity and compassion. One crisp autumn morning, Sophia received an invitation. It was from Ethan, asking her to attend the opening of a new community center funded by his foundation. The center was dedicated to providing resources for underprivileged youth, a place where they could learn, grow, and find support to pursue their aspirations. Sophia hesitated for a moment before accepting. She hadn't seen Ethan in months, but she was curious to see what he had built. The event was modest but heartfelt, a stark contrast to the grandiose gatherings Ethan had once been known for. The community center buzzed with energy as children explored the new facilities, and families expressed gratitude for the opportunities it promised to bring. Sophia arrived to find Ethan standing near the entrance, greeting guests with a genuine smile. When he saw her, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and relief. "You came," he said, extending his hand. Sophia shook it, a small smile playing on her lips. "I wouldn't miss it." He led her on a tour of the center, explaining the programs they were launching: after-school tutoring, vocational training, and even a small business incubator for teens with entrepreneurial ambitions. As they walked, Ethan's passion for the project was evident. This wasn't the Ethan Wallace she had worked for years ago. This was someone who had found purpose in lifting others up. At the end of the tour, they stood in front of a wall displaying the center's mission statement. Ethan turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "This place exists because of you," he said. "You showed me what it means to build something meaningful." Sophia met his gaze, her voice steady. "You built this, Ethan. I may have inspired you, but you did the work." Ethan smiled faintly, nodding. "Maybe, but I needed the wake-up call. And for that, I'll always be grateful." The two spent the rest of the afternoon talking about their respective projects, exchanging ideas and reflecting on how far they had come. It was a conversation filled with mutual respect and a shared understanding of the power of second chances. As the event wound down, Sophia prepared to leave. Ethan walked her to the door, pausing for a moment before speaking. "Thank you for being here," he said. "It means a lot." Sophia smiled. "Keep doing what you're doing, Ethan. The world needs more of this." He watched as she walked away, her confidence as unwavering as ever. For Ethan, it was a reminder of the journey they had both taken. A journey that had transformed not just their lives but the lives of so many others. That evening, as Sophia returned home, she reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. She thought of the young woman she had been, working late nights in Ethan's office, and the woman she had become, a leader, a mentor, and a force for change. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had believed in her, supported her, and been inspired by her. And for Ethan, as he stood in the quiet of the community center, watching the sun set over the city, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, only to discover that true fulfillment came from helping others succeed. Their paths had crossed in a way neither could have predicted, but the impact of that meeting would resonate for years to come. The world had changed them both, and in turn, they were changing the world. As the months turned into years, Sophia's and Ethan's paths crossed occasionally, always at events where purpose and empowerment took center stage. Their shared journey had transformed them into unlikely allies, but more importantly, it had made them advocates for change in ways neither could have imagined. Sophia's initiative became a global phenomenon, its programs replicated in countries worldwide. Her leadership earned her accolades, but she never lost sight of the people who had inspired her from the beginning. The stories of women who had risen above adversity, who had dared to dream and succeeded, were her greatest reward. One evening, Sophia was invited to a gala honoring leaders who had made significant contributions to social progress. She wasn't surprised to see Ethan there, now a celebrated philanthropist whose work had redefined his legacy. As the evening progressed, the two found themselves seated at the same table, a quiet moment amid the grandeur of the event. "You've come a long way," Ethan said, his tone warm. "The whole world knows your name now." Sophia smiled, a hint of playfulness in her expression. "And yet, I still have so much to do." Ethan nodded. "That's what makes you remarkable. You don't stop." Sophia tilted her head, studying him. "Neither do you. This is just as much your legacy as it is mine." Ethan shook his head lightly, a humble smile on his face. "No, Sophia. You're the one who showed me the way. I just followed the path." The event culminated in a series of speeches from the honorees, each reflecting on their journeys and the impact of their work. When it was Sophia's turn, she stood confidently at the podium, her gaze sweeping over the room filled with some of the world's most influential figures. She began by recounting her early days, the late nights spent juggling spreadsheets in Ethan's office while nurturing her dream in secret. "What I learned," she said, her voice steady and passionate, "is that no one can define your worth but you. And no matter how impossible a dream might seem, with resilience and the right people by your side, anything is possible." The crowd erupted in applause, and as Sophia stepped down from the stage, she caught Ethan's eye. He gave her a small nod, his expression filled with pride. As the gala wound down, Ethan approached Sophia as she prepared to leave. The two stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the lights below a reflection of the dreams they had helped ignite in others. "What's next for you?" Ethan asked, his voice curious. Sophia chuckled softly. "Isn't that the question everyone always asks? I just want to keep going. There are always more people to help, more lives to change." Ethan smiled, his expression contemplative. "You've already changed mine. For that, I'll always be grateful." Sophia turned to face him fully, her voice firm but kind. "You changed too, Ethan. You chose to be better, to do better. That's not something everyone can say." They stood there for a moment in silence, the weight of their shared journey lingering in the air. Finally, Sophia extended her hand. "Thank you for believing in me when it mattered." Ethan took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Thank you for showing me what really matters." As they parted ways that evening, both Sophia and Ethan felt a deep sense of closure. Their paths might diverge again, but the impact they had made together would echo far beyond their own lives. For Sophia, it was the continuation of a journey fueled by purpose and passion. For Ethan, it was the fulfillment of a promise to himself to leave the world better than he had found it. And for those they had inspired along the way, it was proof that change, real, meaningful change, was always possible.